And good evening, everybody. I'm Mark Willoughby. We'd like to welcome you to a special edition of the Southeastern Sports Network podcast. This is the playoff edition. Now that most everything is wrapped up today around the football championship subdivision and games that will impact whether Southeastern gets in the playoffs or not. Obviously, the Lions at 7-5 sit right on the bubble. It's a big bubble. We'll talk about it. And quite honestly, the Lions did not get a ton of help today. Got a little bit on the margins. That may be enough. We don't know. Have to see how the committee views things. But as we talk about it real quickly, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about it. But I just want to go over how many teams I think are in from each league, slam dunk, and then really get cut right to the chase to what the bubble is and kind of how many spots we're talking about jockeying over. So we'll start quickly. I think the Big Sky slam dunk has 4 teams in, and that would be Montana State, UC Davis, Idaho, and Montana. I think they're in regardless. No questions asked. I think the United Athletic Coalition or conference or whatever they're calling it's the WAC and the Atlantic Sun have combined together to form a football league, and it looks like they're going to get 3 in. Certainly Abilene Christian is the auto bid winner. Tarleton State will be in, and pretty sure Eastern Kentucky played their way in today. They're going to be 8-4 and played well down the stretch. Of course, they're going to have one more team on the bubble. We'll talk about them here in a moment. The Missouri Valley is going to get 4, and that's it. There's nobody on the bubble from the Missouri Valley. It's 4 and done. The Colonial or Coastal or whatever athletic conference, they changed the name. I think they have 4 solid in. There's going to be 1 on the bubble. I don't think they're going to get in because I think they played their way off today. And Stony Brook, we'll talk about them. You do have to put them on the bubble, but I don't think they're going to get in. I really don't. So I think they're going to get 4 in. The Big South OVC, that was probably the biggest dagger today that Southeastern suffered. And I think I'd mentioned this before. I know I'd talked about it, I think, on the last podcast and probably, in social media and that sort of thing. But Tennessee State beat SEMO today. And I said, watch that game. Tennessee State wins. They're going to get in. Now, they didn't get the auto bid because they had a tiebreaker that didn't go their way. So I think SEMO is going to get in as the auto bid winner. And Tennessee State will get in as an at-large more than likely because they're 9-3 and just beat the auto bid winner. So pretty good chance that played their way in, even though SEMO didn't play well down the stretch at all. Now the question is going to be, do they get a 3rd team in? That'll be one of the bubbles we'll talk about. But I do think they'll definitely get 2 as it stands now. The Southern Conference or the SoCon, I think they definitely, they're going to have an auto bid, and they've got a couple of teams on the bubble. We'll bring those up here momentarily. Patriot League's going to have 1. That'll be the auto bid. Northeast Conference will have 1. That'll be Central Connecticut, who, by the way, Southeastern played back in 21 and 22. Fired their coach, hired a new coach. He got the program turned around, and congratulations to the Blue Devils. They are going to the NCAA playoffs as the auto bid winner with a big win today over Duquesne, who I guess technically would be on the bubble. I just don't think they're going to have a strong enough resume to get them in. Pioneer League, Drake is going to win the Pioneer League. They'll be the auto bid winner there. And then obviously UIW out of the Southland Conference. So as it stands, Big Sky 4, UAC 3. These are what I think are slam dunks. Missouri Valley 4, CAA 4, Big Sky OVC 2, SoCon 1, Patriot League 1, Northeast Conference, PIO, and obviously the Southland are going to have an auto bid. So that's going to eat up 22 spots, if my math is correct. 4, 3, 7, 11, 15, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. Leaves you with 2 more. And the bubble, as I said it, pretty big. So let's take a look at it. Northern Arizona, out of the Big Sky, is going to be 1. They beat Eastern Washington today to finish 8-4 on the year. However, they have 1 non-Division I win, which is not even a D2. So I don't think that win's going to count. Committee's not going to consider it. They're going to be 7-3, just like Southeastern is versus the FBS because they do. I mean the FCS because they do have an FBS loss to Arizona, and there's some head-to-head competition you got to consider as well. They have 2 common opponents. And then hopefully if the committee really does their homework and analyzes the resume and don't just gift Northern Arizona a fifth spot in the Big Sky Conference, then I think Southeastern definitely has a case versus them. I think if you compare the resumes straight up, Southeastern's is stronger, in my opinion. And certainly, because they did more in their league. And, both teams finished strong. Both teams won down the stretch. But I just think Southeastern's, do you reward the fifth place team in the Big Sky who didn't play everybody, didn't play the top two teams in the league, lost to 3 and 4, and then everybody below them, nobody had a winning record. And that was basically all of their Division I wins. Whereas Southeastern finished 7 and 5. SFA got a big win. We'll talk about that over Abilene Christian to finish 7 and 5 without their starting quarterback. And Lamar right now is leading McNeese. I know last check 20-10. So that would be two teams on Southeastern's schedule that could potentially finish with winning records that have pretty good non-conference wins. So, I think if you look at that resume head to head, you really analyze that Southeastern should get in over them. But I think right now conventional wisdom has Northern Arizona in. Every bracket I've seen released tonight has Northern Arizona in. So we'll just state that. Secondly, on the bubble, Southern Utah. We've talked about them. They won today in overtime. They beat the Greg Stevens-led offense of Utah Tech, who is a Southern Utah rival. They're pretty close neighbors, and that's a rivalry, although Utah Tech's a relatively new team to Division I. Started out as a junior college, and they worked their way up to D2, now to D1. It's a growing part of the state, and will eventually be a pretty good program. They're still in the infant stages of development. Greg Stevens is offense coordinator, and they got off to a 2-touchdown lead today. Southern Utah came back, took a 2-touchdown lead. Utah Tech came back and tied it, went to overtime on a 53-yard field goal, and then they fell in double overtime. Had a chance to win in the first overtime, but Southern Utah held on. So they're on the bubble. They have an FBS win. They're 7 and 5, like Southeastern, but with an FBS win. Are they the third or the fourth team out of the UAC? That's going to be a question to ponder. We talked about Stony Brook, or I don't think, I kind of hinted at it. Stony Brook lost today to Monmouth. They gave up 55 points. They were 8 and 3 coming in today. I think they were in. All you had to do was win. And they were definitely going to be in. Well, they lost. So what happened when New Hampshire, as we go to the CAA now, Stony Brook loses, I think that's going to knock them out because they kind of bottomed out at the end of the year. They lost last week to New Hampshire and then lost today to Monmouth, who's not going to make the playoffs. New Hampshire did win today. They went on the road and beat Maine, so I think they played their way in. I think they'll be the fourth team out of the CAA. So I think Stony Brook's going to probably be the odd man out. They'll be on the bubble. Again, they have 8 wins. Do you want to gift them, as the fifth team from the CAA when they really didn't play a tough schedule, didn't play well down the stretch? I have a hard time thinking the committee will reward them for that. But you never know. You got to put them on the bubble. UT Martin out of the OVC and the Big South. That's a coalition similar to the UAC. They had to come together because they didn't have enough teams to have an auto bid. Tennessee Martin won today in overtime. Again, another overtime game, beat Lindenwood. Today, Lindenwood not going to make the playoffs. Now, UT Martin's 8 and 4 with technically an FBS win over Kennesaw State. Kennesaw State's a FCS team transitioning up, and I think they're kind of in that second year. So they're officially an FBS team, so the committee will kind of look at it like that, but they're really not even a good FCS team. But UT Martin does have a win over them. So they're 8 and 4. Is that going to carry more weight than 7 and 5, second place Southeastern? I think a lot of people have them in now. And that being the case, as we talk about this bubble and how big it is, and basically 7, 8 teams for 2 spots, it's going to be tough. Taking a look at Tennessee Tech would be another one on the bubble from the same league, 7 and 5. If UT Martin gets in, I don't think they're going to get in, but I listed them here. Western Carolina out of the SoCon, they're 7 and 5. They went on the road, beat Sanford. It was a close game today, but they did win on the road. So they are bubble eligible, I guess, so to speak, with 7 wins. Is the SoCon going to get left with one team? like the Southland. It's just hard to imagine the Southern Conference only getting one team. So between Western Carolina and Chattanooga, they're both 7-5. If they get a second team, somebody's got to get left out. So I don't know. Don't know what the committee sees in that, but the resumes are going to be compared. And also, I talked about Chattanooga. They won today too. Again, another close game, but they won to get to 7-5. East Tennessee State is 7-5 technically, but they only have 6 D1 wins. I don't think they would be considered, but they are 7-5. So if you want to expand the bubble a little bit, you can. Realistically, I think it's going to come down to Northern Arizona, UT Martin, Southern Utah, Southeastern, Western Carolina, Chattanooga, probably, hopefully not in that order, but I think that's going to be who it's going to be between. I don't think Stony Brook's going to get in. Don't see Tennessee Tech. But really, they're fighting over 2 spots. So that's kind of where it stands. So wish I had better news. I think Southeastern's resume is strong. I think it holds up with any of those schools, but I just think the conventional wisdom, when you look at the bracketologists and the pundits and everybody in the Twitter sphere or whatever they call it, are just assuming it's going to be Northern Arizona and UT Martin because they have 8 wins. It looks good on paper. They're just throwing them in there, but I don't know if it's that clear cut. Hopefully not. Hopefully the committee is really digging deep. I think Southeastern has a very strong leg to stand on when you're talking about the bubble. I mean, it's hard to say, you're 7-5, we deserve to be in. I know there's always an argument, if you lose 5 games, you shouldn't get in, but 2 of them are FBS, one South Dakota State, one is Tarleton, and one's the UIW. I mean, that's your losses. And then the SFA win looks pretty good right now because they dominated ACU, Abilene Christian today, won the UAC conference, and they did it without their starting quarterback. So Southeastern beat SFA with Sam Bidlack. Sam Bidlack's still available. We were talking about them as being in the playoffs or possibly on the bubble because they may run out the table and went 9-3 with wins over UIW and Abilene Christian. That would have been hard to turn down, with a prolific quarterback and a dynamic offense. Even jumping Southeastern, who beat them head-to-head and finishing higher in the standings, you would still have to consider SFA. They're no longer in consideration. They have a non-D1 win, only won 6 FCS games and do not have their starting quarterback. But they did get a big win today, and that helped Southeastern's strength of schedule. But again, we're looking at about 2 spots available, and realistically, probably 5 schools that'll really be hardcore considered, but 7 to 8 that can claim bubble eligibility. So that's where we stand. Wish it was better news, but it is what it is. So hopefully keep your fingers crossed and hope for good news, and hopefully the Lions will be playing next week. If they're not, hats off to Frank Selfo. Again, anyway, hats off. You see the River Bell right above my head. Great win Friday or Thursday night. Southeastern went on the road. Always tough to play in Thibodaux, even though the Southeastern's won the last few games there. But the River Bell special, you throw the records out. It was tied 17-17 going in. The Lions come home with the win. They're 18-17 in the rivalry. And, regardless of the records, to come away victorious just speaks volumes to the job Frank Selfo and his staff did. The players never wavered. I got off to a bad start, 1-4, coming off of 3-8, and this team stayed focused, stayed hungry, stayed driven, knew what the mission was, and did the very best each and every week. Came up short a couple of times, at Tarleton and UIW, but again, they did not let that deter, what their mission was, and that was to finish strong and put the best possible resume together to be considered for an at-large berth in the playoffs. So hats off to Frank Selfo, his staff, and all the players, everybody associated with the program on a job well done. And hopefully it's enough. And hopefully we're come back here on Sunday night, tomorrow night, and we're talking about who we're playing next week. But if not, it was a great year. Probably one of the most fun I've had on the Southeastern Sports Network broadcast, doing the games. And, it just, there's something about this team is special. So we just wanted to point that out. Until we find out tomorrow what the bracket is, we'll come back one way or the other. We'll talk either about the season or the playoffs, whichever whichever pans out. All right. This is Mark Willoughby. We'll see you soon here on the Southeastern Sports Network podcast.